I didn't know what made people want to be friends. I didn't know what made people attractive to one another. I didn't know what underlay social interactions. These are the words of Ted Bundy. Psychopath is a popular word to describe people with an abnormal social behavior, which deviates significantly and consistently from expected ways of reacting and behaving, what we call normal. Bundy and Bernardo both met the criteria of antisocial personality disorder, which is characterized by a long-term pattern of irresponsible, manipulative, and deceptive behavior, along with a consistent lack of concern for other people's safety and lives. People with ASPD often display low neuroticism, meaning a high level of resistance to stress and less chance of experiencing feelings such as fear, sadness, and guilt. They are, however, prone to irritability and anger, even in small things that other people would find insignificant. They have a cognitive understanding of right and wrong, but this understanding has little to no effect on their behavior. And as we'll see with Bundy and Bernardo, there's a sense of antagonism to their personalities. Their sense of self-worth, or superiority, more like it, is unusually prominent when considering their status as inmates. Bundy and Bernardo harbored strong feelings of resentment toward their mother. Bundy was born outside of wedlock. To avoid the shame that came with it, his mother lied to him about being his sister. As a young man, he eventually discovered the truth about his quote-unquote illegitimacy. Also, it's believed that Bundy was deeply resentful after being rejected by his first girlfriend. This speaks to the psychopath's grandiose sense of self-importance. Even relatively minor things that all people experience, rejection, have a much bigger impact on them because of this inflated ego or emotional immaturity. Similarly, Bernardo was the quote-unquote illegitimate result of an extramarital relationship his mother had. When he was 16, his mother told him that the man he had thought to be his biological father wasn't. He became repulsed by his mother and began calling her names to her face. Bundy and Bernardo were both perceived in a way that didn't reflect their whole or true nature. They managed to effectively fool their surroundings. Bundy was thought of as quiet and shy, and Bernardo was considered cute and always smiling. But behind their very polite exterior, they both had dark fantasies about controlling other people's fate, possessing their victims totally. Central aspects of their modus operandi and the victims they targeted were also similar. They chose victims they knew they could easily overpower, and they used their supposed shyness and charm to lure them, and they felt no remorse about their actions. Bundy phrased it in this self-glorifying way: I guess I'm in the enviable position of not having to deal with guilt. Here's Bundy, who acted as his own attorney, proposing to his girlfriend in court.
Carol, do you want to marry me?
Yes.
And I want to marry you.
Yes.
And I do want to marry you.
One of many indicators that his shyness was to a large extent, if not solely, an act. On a background and psychological level, the two of them have a lot in common. Let's find out what they share on a linguistic level. The first area we'll look at is emotions. Psychopaths lack emotional dimension. They say the right things at the right time, but ultimately they don't sound convincing. That's because their words aren't emotionally grounded, but are aimed at persuasion. Or in other words, they have a cognitive understanding of empathy, making them very good, too good, at reading people. But they don't have emotional empathy. They simply don't feel what other people feel, which is a depressing way to live life, really. In the clips we're about to see, Bernardo's complaining about his circumstances. How dare the police treat him so unfairly?
Okay, problem. They make a public announcement. It's written on my file here that I lied to police, and
Okay.
big problem. You guys love doing that. I'm this crazy psychopathic liar. Why was that statement issued? Why didn't they come in and talk to me if they didn't have enough information? We were waiting on that tape. You can play that tape back. I asked you guys if Pure Reach were going to come in. I sat there month after month after month. No one came. I turned on the TV in September. declared that Paul Bernardo was, this crazy liar to police. What's the fundamental problem here?
Well,
I mean,
I
treat justice the Canadian way, and no one comes in, and now you guys are saying that you didn't have enough information. I'm not going to sit here and come voluntarily and have people come. You guys ban me from the press. You roll your stories over, and you constantly say that I'm a liar. I made mistakes 17 years ago. Okay, fine, I did. But now we're talking about today, and you're not going to roll forward that I'm some psychopathic liar sitting in jail.
Okay.
I mean, that's just awful. I mean, come on.
Okay.
Enough manipulation, you know what I mean? Either you tell the truth or don't, otherwise the whole purpose of any interview is just stupid.
Next, notice how unconvincing his emotional appeal is.
It's one thing, I'm a human being, and to say that I'm a dangerous offender is fine. I mean, for publicity, get that, tough on crime, get that bad guy. But when you go to a certain point of line, it's just, it affects me totally. I made mistakes a long time ago. But don't say that today about me, because then we're lying, and then we got a big problem because I'm looking at you and you're the bad guys. Because I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm telling the truth, and you guys are walking around issuing statements that I lied here, I lied there.
The words, "I'm a human being," are aimed at persuading the detectives that he's like them in the most basic and ridiculous sense he could have proposed, a human being. He doesn't say how it affects him, just that it affects him totally. Totally has an emphasizing function. Here, it's a disconnected linguistic element, not part of a rooted emotional experience, as emphasized by its delay.
Totally.
It's conceivable that he is indeed affected. But in case he is, it relates more so to his pride, to not being called a liar. Not once has he said he's affected by what he did to his victims, who were, obviously, human beings too. On the contrary, he's downplayed his actions with euphemisms, followed by commands. Overall, his emotional appeal falls flat, even though he's likely thinking that he's doing great. In his last interview, Bundy also had a hard time expressing emotions. His descriptions were carefully articulated statements designed to portray him in a positive light. And just like Bernardo has no problem blaming other people even when convicted, Bundy similarly blames outside influences for his actions. Let's listen to Bundy's carefully chosen words.
Another factor here that I haven't mentioned is the use of alcohol. But I think that what alcohol did, in conjunction with, let's say, my exposure to with alcohol, reduced my inhibitions. First, the brutal urge to do that kind of thing, and then what happens is once it has been more or less satisfied and recedes, you might say, or spent, that sense, that kind of energy level recedes, and basically I became myself again. Basically, I was a normal person. I was essentially a normal person. I had good friends. I led a normal life, except for this one small but very potent and very destructive segment of it that I kept very secret and very close to myself and didn't let anybody know about it.
1. Bundy's downplaying the destructive segment of his personality with minimizing language. 2. He appeals to deity. Under these circumstances, deceptive people are more prone to appeal to God in order to be perceived as righteous. Like this guy.
I don't know where they're at. I do not know where they are at. If I could have my babies back home right now, I would. I want them back. I want everybody back. That is the God's honest truth.
3. Bundy associates with other people as he portrays himself as a victim, even though he's previously denied this as his intention.
I'm not saying that it caused me to go out and do certain things. And I take full responsibility for whatever I've done and all the things that I've done. That's not the question here.
The association's designed to portray him as normal. Bundy remains calm in his last interview, whereas Bernardo's openly upset, or most likely acts upset. Fake outrage is a common manipulative behavior.
I have some questions that were given to me to ask you in relation to the Balkovich matter, Robert Balkovich matter. Before we do that, I just want to say, you understand obviously the importance of telling the truth and the consequences potentially of someone who lies to the police and not telling the truth.
I think we just covered that. Actually, I was referring, you guys tell the truth.
Right. Okay, so we're aware of that. And in this matter, I believe that you've had some conversation with your counsel in regards to it. And there has been some discussion about polygraph testing in this matter. Is that true or not true? Do you recall that?
Well, you're opening up cans of worms everywhere.
I'm just asking you a specific question.
I mean, you already said I'm lying here with the appeal. You're saying.
Okay, I'm not saying anything about who's lying. I'm simply.
And I've given you directions to go to find the truth.
Right.
No one's done that.
And I've asked.
However, Bundy is also capable of acting upset. In the next clip, he visibly enjoys being the center of attention more than anything.
Mr. Bundy? You told me that you were going to get me. You said he was going to get me, okay? You've got the indictment. It's all you're going to get. Let's read it. Let's go. My chance to talk to the press.
Contrary to Section 78204 Florida statute.
I'll plead not guilty right now.
And your grand...
Also, Bundy's just as strong-willed as Bernardo.
You'll have to admit there's a hell of a lot of circumstantial evidence.
No, I won't admit that. I don't really know exactly what you're referring to, and I don't really want to discuss it. But I don't care what anybody says or the suspicions anyone harbors on the basis of that misinformation. And indeed, that's what I call it.
Their goals are the same: to evade responsibility and portray themselves in the best light possible. Bundy even refers to himself as the all-American boy, which is similar to when he describes himself in the third person, indicating how highly he thinks of himself.
Years ago when I was first arrested was that there was no clue. They looked at me and they looked at the all-American boy, and I mean I wasn't perfect, but I want to be quite candid with you. I was okay. Okay, those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands. On the one hand, well-meaning, decent people will condemn behavior of a Ted Bundy while they're walking past a magazine rack full of the very kinds of things that send young kids down the road to be Ted Bundys. That's the irony.
You can learn more about the most important verbal signs of deception in this video. Links in the description. If you like the video, click the like button, and if you're excited about how language works, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell for all updates. Bundy's self-serving agenda is further emphasized when he's asked a question about one of his victims, a particularly horrific case that gives him the opportunity to express remorse. But in accordance with his true nature and not the humble and introspective persona he's created for this interview, he declines and shows anger instead.
Little Kimberly Leach, what did you feel after that? Were there the normal emotions 3 days later, or where were you, Ted?
I can't really talk about that right now. That's
too painful.
But I won't be able to talk about that.
Okay.
I can't begin to understand.
Also, there are obvious limits to how self-critical Bundy's capable of being. As we watch the next clip, we should keep in mind that at this point in time, he knows what he's done, and yet he's capable of singing his own praises.
Are you angry?
Sure, I get angry. Very, very angry and indignant. I don't like being locked up for something I didn't do, and I don't like my liberty taken away, and I don't like being treated like an animal, and I don't like people walking around and ogling me like I'm some sort of weirdo, because I'm not. I'm perfectly happy with the person I am, and I've always been. There's I don't pay my telephone bills on time, and I don't write my mother as many letters as I should. There are all kinds of things I can improve about myself, but a weirdo knows I feel good about myself. I'm happy with myself.
You don't change. You stay Ted Bundy 24 hours a day.
Well, gee, that name sounds funny. You know, I hear Ted Bundy in so many different contexts. I stay me.
You are not guilty.
I'm not guilty. Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old? I'm not guilty of the charges which have been filed against me. No man is truly innocent. I mean, we all have transgressed in some way in our lives, and as I say, I've been impolite, and there are things I regret having done in my life, but nothing like the things I think that you're referring to.
In the same interview, we also notice how he immediately imitates emotions when he's asked about why he's so unemotional.
There's always one thing that amazed me. As you know, I covered your trial, and I was there every day. You never showed any emotion.
Yeah.
For somebody who believes he is so innocent, why was there no emotion?
My attorney, John O'Connell in Salt Lake, and I've always mused over just how I should behave. What's the right way for Ted Bundy to behave and make sure that people get the right impression? And I just behaved the way I felt was right. I didn't show any emotion because, you know, what am I supposed to do? Am I going to jump up on the table? Am I going to scream? That's what I felt like doing. I heard my mother crying. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. And sure, I'm mad. I'm showing emotion right now because inside I'm mad. But I've kept it together because there's no point in destroying myself. I have got to keep myself together. I have got to stay calm. I've got to keep my presence of mind, because as long as I do that, I'm going to beat these people. And that's the way I feel. I showed no emotion. I felt emotion, believe me. Now,
words give clues about people's personality structure, and here we learn two crucial psychopathic facts about Bundy's personality structure. First of all, his contrapuntal laughter, meaning there's a misalignment between the input a person receives and the output they give. In this case, Bundy's asked why he didn't show emotion. This is the input, and he laughs, indicating that he's detached from feelings of sadness. This is the output. Few seconds later, however, he manages to snort a little, imitating sadness. But when nothing else happens, he switches to the psychopath's antagonism.
I've got to keep my presence of mind, because as long as I do that, I'm going to beat these people.
Changing expressions like this is unreliable behavior. Secondly, we learn that he views expressions of feelings as a tactic, because he says he discussed it with his attorney just how he should behave. Bundy and Bernardo's behavior is similar to Chris Watts' behavior in this regard. In the following, we first notice how Watts also starts imitating emotions the minute he's confronted with his lack of emotions. And we learn that emotions don't come naturally to him. He reveals it himself.
And you have not shed one tear in 2 days that you've been here. Not one. And you have not shed one tear over them not being around. Help me understand that.
I love those girls. I would never do anything just because I haven't shed a tear. You get
no, that's weird. Is that weird?
Don't look into that like I don't love my kids.
Tell me, explain to me.
I know, like, even my attorneys told me, like, you need to show a little more emotion. They said I was just a cold person, just looking at me.
In his last interview, Bundy had one final self-righteous message to his victims' families. Notice the euphemism, harmed.
I'm aware that I can't begin to understand the pain that the parents of these children that I have, and these young women that I have harmed, feel. And I can't restore really much to them, if anything. I won't pretend to, and I don't even expect them to forgive me, and I'm not asking for it. That kind of forgiveness is of God, and if they have it, they have it. If they don't, well, maybe they'll find it someday.
Pretend is another interesting verb. Pretending's obviously been on his mind, just like he's previously said kid you. Clearly, deception is on his mind, and his word choice could suggest that he's thought of killing the interviewer, Dobson.
What thoughts have you had in these last few days?
Well, I won't kid you to say that I'm not going to kid you. I'll kid you not.
Dobson, an evangelical leader, showed up with a clear agenda to prove the negative impact that adult content has on people, allegedly. Bundy supported Dobson's narrative, even though he himself indicated that this kind of content wasn't his motivation or primary motivation at all. As he wrote in a letter to the author, Anne Rule, who in the world reads these publications, "I have never purchased such a magazine." However, Bundy's chameleon-like personality makes it easy for him to adapt to any narrative. Not unlike politicians, by the way, but I better leave it there. In case Bundy wasn't influenced by this content, the verbs pretend and kid take on a darker meaning. The most interesting thing about this passage is the final perspective. He says,
that kind of forgiveness is of God, and if they have it, they have it. If they don't, well, maybe they'll find it someday.
He more than implies that if they're truly Christian, they should be able to forgive him, even though he acts humble and says he's not asking to be forgiven. He puts the burden of performance on the relatives to forgive him now or maybe later. In conclusion, we found that Bundy and Bernardo share at least 4 traits as revealed by their word choice and in accordance with their shared psychological traits. Lack of emotional dimension, lack of remorse, obvious irritability, which could be fake. No matter what, this irritability reveals their inflated sense of self-worth. Tendency to blame and criticize outside influences, whether it's the police in Bernardo's case or adult content in Bundy's case. In light of the psychological and linguistic observations, let's finish with the quote that this video started with. "I didn't know what made people want to be friends. I didn't know what made people attractive to one another. I didn't know what underlay social interactions." On a surface level, these words sound introspective and honest. However, knowing the chameleon Bundy with so many personas to fit so many social settings, can we really trust him or any other psychopath when they're presumably describing themselves? In my opinion, the answer is no, or at the very least, that we should be highly skeptical. The narcissism that's so deeply ingrained in their personalities means that they enjoy attention, both positive and negative, but preferably negative. They love talking about themselves, and they know exactly which sympathy strategies to use. But they can't always control what they say, and what they say gives them away. Like the Danish Lutheran pastor Thomas Gotthard, who took the life of his wife, Maria, a crime he had meticulously planned for months. His narcissistic reason for this was that her absence would make it easier for him to continue his extramarital relationship. In court, he focused on the effects his actions had on his own life, saying, "Mit liv har jeg sendt ud i mørket, hvor jeg vil forblive." In English, "I've sent my life out into the darkness, where I shall remain." This focus on himself made his unemotional apology to his deceased wife that more unconvincing and inappropriate. As he said in court, "Mest af alt undskyld til min elskede Maria." Most of all, apologies to my beloved Mary. People with prominent psychopathic and/or narcissistic traits are inherently unreliable. Bundy and Bernardo were both ruthless and remorseless. But even with this comparison in mind, there's an element of evil to the core of Bundy's personality, which, in my opinion, remains unmatched.